Well, now to the latest sign that could be the case. The IRS is about to get its hands on your health care. Yes, the same IRS that wastes your tax dollars on line dancing and targeted conservative groups is now getting ready to help implement Obamacare. And many Americans are not happy.
The IRS is going to carry out Obamacare in some form. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I think this is a big we told you so in the beginning. Now we're going to have 16,000 new IRS agents implementing Obamacare when they simply can't even implement a nonprofit status. I think America needs to take a bigger look at what's happening nationwide in this country, because we're going to wake up tomorrow and not even recognize the country we're in.
Seeing the ineptitude that we've seen in the past few days and the past few weeks with the IRS and how they can't even process a few applications, how in the world are they going to control the health care of 300 million people? It's scary, and I hope they repeal that part of the bill.
First thing is to take Obamacare out of IRS before we can abolish it. At least do that.
The fact that they're going to take over our health care, we've got a government, they're not even from the government. They don't have the power to do what they do. They were not given that power, and the American people need to take that back. We do not need them running health care when they can't even manage their own checkbook.
Congressman Tom Price is a member of the Congressional Health Care Caucus. He joins us. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Greta, good to be with you.
It's an interesting argument that the IRS came and processed some tax-exempt applications. Some they just sit on and don't process. Some they are actually pretty nasty, targeting groups. So how would the Obama administration or how would the IRS defend itself against that, do you think?
Well, this is the concern that folks have, and you saw the passion out there on the west lawn of the Capitol this week. Look, a fundamental principle of our society is that the people have to trust the government, and right now nobody trusts the IRS to do what they're doing currently, and let alone the job that they've been assigned through the ACA, through the President's health care law, to enforce that law, and we don't trust them. So we've introduced a bill to say that the IRS may not enforce or implement any portion of Obamacare, and we're getting huge support within the Congress, and I think that we ought to pass that bill.
All right, the bill that it may pass the House is probably going to dead on arrival in the Senate. It's not going to get signed at the White House, but it certainly is spawning some debate. But just so I'm sure is that the way that this is set up now, the IRS will be implementing the tax penalty and the mandates. It won't actually be telling whether or not you can get a colonoscopy or a heart transplant or an antibiotic, right?
Well, you don't know the answer to that. I asked that question in committee a couple of weeks ago of an IRS individual, Steve Miller, who was the acting commissioner at the time, and he said he wasn't certain because he didn't think that would be necessary. But not necessary is exactly the language that he used when the tax-exempt portion went after and targeted individuals in our society. So who knows, if the IRS is in charge of determining whether your health coverage satisfies the government, then they've got to know what your health coverage is. And all sorts of personal things go into your health coverage and the decisions that you make for yourself and for your family. Do we want the IRS knowing that information? I certainly don't, and I don't believe the majority of Americans do either.
If you love Obamacare, or if you support it, and you know, if you really want it, and I mean, it's even extraordinary to think that the IRS is going to effectively deliver it. Even if you get them off the hook for the targeting of the conservative groups, they have shown over and over to be inept and being very poor stewards of our money by virtue of the fact that in a 2-year period they spent $50 million on parties. Those aren't conferences; those are parties, and that's just because we didn't audit the other years, and they couldn't even provide all the receipts for the 2 years. Yet they want the receipts from everybody else. And so we're sort of turning that over to an organization that's not particularly shown itself to be efficient or fair or good stewards.
No, you're absolutely right. And think about what they did with the tax-exempt organizations. They targeted conservative groups. They targeted folks that were not politically consistent with what this administration wanted or big government wants. So what's to keep them? They can't challenge or target all individuals regarding their health coverage. What's to keep them from targeting conservative groups or individuals to see whether or not they're due penalties or interest rates on what kind of health coverage they have or don't have? That's the concern that all of us have.
But even if you give it the best possible look from their perspective? Say it's only like 5 or 6 people at the IRS that they went rogue, whether it's in Washington or Cincinnati or whatever. The conferences alone had 2,600 plus managers, and you figure 5 people in the office knew the 2,600 were going, so you multiply that by 5, it's probably 10 knew. So all these people were so well aware of it, and so the pool is so big of people who are inept. And just forget the 5 rogue or the 10 or 20 or whoever knew on the targeting. Thousands must have known about the conference.
You're absolutely right. And this is a culture at the IRS. It's clearly not just a few individuals. It's a culture that says the government knows best and government has the right to know everything about you. And, in fact, it can target individuals or donors or groups of individuals. That's what's wrong. And we ought not allow the IRS into our health care.
And your money is mine. I will do with it as I damn well please is the other part of it. But anyway, Congressman, I'm taking the last word on that. Thank you, sir.